In some ways, I wanted this to be kind of a letter to my son. My dad wrote a book before he died and about his family.
American television newsman and political commentator Anderson Cooper has an interesting life story to share. In the middle of all the controversy he has previously spoken about, there are his own hardships and difficulties, such as the loss of loved ones. Many important individuals in Cooper's life have passed away, and he has been forthright about how these tragedies have affected him. Wyatt passed away at the age of 50 on January 5, 1978, after suffering a series of heart attacks during open-heart surgery. Cooper was just 10 years old. The abrupt removal of my dad from my life was terrible for me. While my mom was usually at work, my dad was the rock of our family. She was someone I didn't know very well. My dad had left, and now my whole existence seemed precarious. Cooper recalled well the trying period following his father's passing. Both his mother's profound grief and his own difficulty in accepting her death are vividly recalled by him. He emotionally withdrew and had trouble connecting with his mother's recollections of his father. To alleviate the ache, he withdrew within. Wyatt Emery Cooper was Anderson's father, and the two had a complicated and influential relationship. Wyatt had an influence on him even though he lost his father when he was just 10 years old. In his memory, Anderson finds his father's fondness for narratives. Anderson inherited a passion for storytelling and the transformative power of words from her book and screenwriter father Wyatt. This probably shaped Anderson's decision to become a journalist. Honesty and openness are also traits his father possesses. Wyatt fostered an environment of trust and candor, allowing Anderson to freely share his innermost thoughts and emotions. Because of this, they developed a deep bond emotionally. No matter how much Anderson's hobbies and personality clashed with his own, Wyatt always made room for and encouraged them. Because of this, Anderson felt safe enough to be himself. Even though their time together was brief, Wyatt had a significant impact on Anderson. He had a profound impact on Anderson's worldview, outlook on life, and capacity to cope with loss. Because of his father and his own fatherhood experiences, Anderson has maintained a connection to him through his work. He has mentioned that being a parent has deepened his understanding of his father and the special relationship they had. Even though Wyatt's tragic death severed Anderson Cooper's connection with his father, the bond they shared was formative. Because of that, he has a profound appreciation for narrative, an honesty code, and an awareness of the nuances of life and death. The box of memories and Anderson's father's belt were brought up in an interview concerning loss. A box of belts belonged to Anderson Cooper's late father, and he doesn't know what to do with them. He has been painstakingly going through his father's possessions, which he has stashed in his basement. For his kids, he's thinking of sewing a quilt from their dad's old clothes, but he can't decide what to do with the belts. There aren't many tangible possessions that belong to his dad, and he's reluctant to part with them. Notably, despite Anderson's early parental death, he inherited many admirable qualities from Wyatt, who achieved great success in his own right. Wyatt Emery Cooper was an incredibly multi-talented individual who had a profound love for narrative. He moved to New York City from Mississippi in 1927 to pursue acting, and eventually appeared on Broadway. Nevertheless, he was talented in other areas as well. Working in Hollywood as a writer and scriptwriter, he befriended literary giants like Dorothy Parker. Pleasant Grove, Mississippi, a little village near Quitman, was Cooper's boyhood home. Emmett Debro Cooper and Rixie Jane Annie Cooper were his parents. Even though he was born into a poor family with deep Southern roots, he moved to New Orleans when he was a little boy. After finishing his degree in theatrical arts at UCLA, he was well on his way to a career in acting. Cooper relocated to New York City in his 20s with the intention of pursuing acting professionally. His Broadway debut was in the 1953-54 season of the play The Strong Are Lonely, which he performed when he was 26 years old. The show had a limited run at the Broadhurst Theater. Acting wasn't his only artistic pursuit. He was also a prolific writer. Cooper lived in Los Angeles in his 30s, worked as a screenwriter, and went to UCLA and UC Berkeley. His friendship with Dorothy Parker and Alan Campbell began while they were both residing in West Hollywood. Upon Dorothy Parker's passing in 1967, Cooper wrote a renowned article for Esquire magazine with the headline, "Whatever you think Dorothy Parker was like, she wasn't." He relocated to Manhattan in the early 1960s and became the magazine's editor. A Memoir and a Celebration, 1975, The Glass House, 1972, and The Chapman Report, 1962, are among his works as a writer. His marriage to heiress Gloria Vanderbilt in 1963 catapulted him into the limelight and gave his life a new direction. Carter and Anderson Cooper were their sons. For Wyatt, his boys were his stake in immortality. He loved his family dearly. Tragically, he passed away during open-heart surgery when he was just 50 years old. His creative legacy, his devotion to his family, and his body of work are all testaments to his life's journey. Christ Episcopal Church Cemetery in Mississippi is the location of Wyatt Emery Cooper's burial. His ancestors settled in the town of Quitman, where this is situated. His own tale started in the South, so it's a touching link to his roots. Carter Vanderbilt Anderson Cooper's death was a terrible tragedy. An unfortunate event led to Carter's death in 1988 when he was 23 years old. This happened 10 years after Wyatt Emery Cooper, their father, passed away. Carter Cooper, the eldest son of Gloria Vanderbilt and Wyatt Cooper, and the brother of Anderson Cooper, arrived unannounced at his mother's 14th-floor New York City apartment on the morning of July 22, 1988. The girl he loved and was in love with recently broke up with him. He broke the news to his mom that he was returning home. After seeing that his brother's bedroom was unoccupied and larger, Mrs. Vanderbilt advised that he move in with him. Sliding glass doors led out to the terrace, and there was a fireplace as well. Carter, who had been up all night, went to his room to lie on the sofa after dinner. The sliding glass door was opened by him. He requested a comforter from his mom so he could slumber in the midst of the excruciating heat, and he rejected her offer of air conditioning. He questioned his mother, "Mom, am I blinking?" before she departed, confirming that he slept through his nap. Mrs. Vanderbilt discovered him dozing off many times throughout his nap. They had intended to watch a movie they had rented after he had slept. It was around 7 o'clock in the evening. Entering his mother's room, Carter, who appeared confused and asked, "What's going on?" many times, was awake and alert. Following a brief discussion in which Mrs. Vanderbilt sought to reassure and reacquaint her son, Carter bolted, hurried up the stairs to his bedroom. Quickly following after him was his mother. Sitting on the terrace's low wall with one foot on the floor and the other propped up against it, she discovered him there. The two continued their brief chat while his mother tried to dissuade him from staring at the wall. He made a military sign that meant stop as he resisted her worried advances. "Will I ever feel again?" he asked himself. He stood, with a terrible, rigid tenseness, staring past her, past the river as if he didn't see them. Mrs. Vanderbilt offered to call his new therapist, but she couldn't recall her number. The number was yelled out by Carter, who then uttered the F-bomb. His gaze fixated on the scene below, as if captivated by it, as a helicopter swooped overhead. Carter glanced up at his mother again, his hand extended in a longing gesture. With the grace of an athlete, he slid over the wall, clinging to the edge as if it were a gym, his grip firm and confident until he finally let go. Carter Cooper had no history of substance abuse, and his autopsy confirmed that no narcotics or alcohol were in his system. He was taking a new inhaler for his asthma, and he was also seeing a therapist, but even she was taken aback by his untimely demise. Gloria Vanderbilt documented this horrific event in her book, A Mother's Story, 8 years later. The author believed that Carter's psychosis was brought on by the new inhaler. Several details in A Mother's Story, while not particularly disturbing on their own, hint that something was amiss with Carter. For example, he had recently ended his relationship with a girlfriend, and he hadn't slept in days. Despite the scorching summer heat, he was still chilly, and he had asked for a quilt to help him sleep. The following are some of his repeated inquiries. "Mom, am I blinking?" He was very thirsty. His eyes were glazed over when he entered his mother's room after his nap. His question, asked several times, "What is going on?" when nothing in particular was going on. His question on the terrace, uttered several times, "Will I ever feel again?" His fixation on the sight below and his stiff, hard body language. Ever since he was a little boy, Carter suffered from severe allergies. The idea of being asleep during anesthesia made him loathe the prospect of missing out on any part of life. Theophylline was Carter's new inhaler, and Mrs. Vanderbilt, in her quest to understand her son's behavior, investigated its known properties. A study in the Journal of Allergy and Clinical Immunology linked the drug to agitation, insomnia, terrible nightmares, and acute paradoxical depressive states, among others. Anderson and his mother, Gloria Vanderbilt, were deeply affected by Carter's passing. Anderson Cooper's grief over Carter's death is deeply ingrained in his personal history, and he has been forthright about the questions and anguish that have persisted after his brother's passing, and how they have affected his perspective on life and death. He has beautifully described the normal sibling dynamic, a blend of rivalry, friendship, and profound affection, in his accounts of his connection with his somewhat older brother Carter. Anderson recollects their formative years as being characterized by the usual sibling rivalry, fights, toy wars, and even a funny story about Carter biting his lip in childhood pictures, as if irritated by Anderson's very presence. Anderson recently uncovered some of their childhood toys, which now bring back good memories. Carter was protective of Anderson, watching out for him and even training him to ride a bike. Despite their differences, they shared identical hobbies, especially a liking for the same toys and games. Anderson's life was profoundly affected by his brother Carter's untimely death in 1988. He has spoken about the pain and mysteries that still surround his brother's death. Anderson admits that his life was changed by losing Carter at such a young age. Anderson often thinks about what Carter could have been and the experiences they could have had. Despite the years that have gone, Anderson remains deeply connected to his brother's memory. He treasures the memories they shared and is still shaped by their bond. Does his perspective on fatherhood change as a result of Carter's passing? Without a doubt. Anderson now views his connection with Carter through a fresh lens, seeing similarities to their sibling bond in the interactions of his own boys and working to cultivate a strong link between them. In spite of the anguish of loss, Anderson Cooper treasures the memories they shared and is still impacted by the bond they had. He recognizes the special bond between siblings and the significance of nurturing that bond. Anderson Cooper remembers his brother Carter with a blend of warmth, humor, and sadness. Additionally, Anderson's opinion on suicide by self-inflicted means is colored by his intensely personal experience with the death of his elder brother. Recognizing the profound anguish and hopelessness that can motivate someone to end their own life, Cooper tackles the subject of suicide with much compassion and insight, avoiding oversimplification and passing judgment. He is familiar with the difficulty of making sense of such a loss and its continuing influence on survivors, and he has been forthright about the unanswered questions and what-ifs that sometimes precede suicide attempts. In his talk, Cooper stresses the significance of individuals being aware of mental health issues and getting treatment if they are battling with suicidal thoughts. He also calls for more open dialogue about mental health and urges people to seek support. Recognizing that the anguish and questions may never totally go, he opposes the concept of closure following a suicide, instead believing in methods to live with the loss and honor the memory of the person who died. Cooper, although recognizing the tragedy of suicide, stresses the need of remembering not just the end, but also the life that the person led. He thinks it is worth celebrating the life that the person led and cherishing the memories that they left behind. Anderson Cooper's perspective on suicide by suicide is informed by his own experience and his profound comprehension of the nuances of loss and grief. His candor and transparency have contributed to the destigmatization of discussions surrounding suicide by suicide and the provision of solace and assistance to those impacted by it. On the 31st anniversary of his brother Carter's suicide, Anderson Cooper spoke about his continuing pain and the mystery surrounding his brother's suicide at the tender age of 23. He said that he thinks about Carter constantly and misses him deeply. Friends like Kelly Ripa and Brooke Shields extended their condolences and offered support. Carter's death was a traumatic event, and their mother witnessed it. Anderson has shared how this loss has haunted him, questioning why it happened. He struggles with the lack of clear answers and acknowledges that sometimes there is no why when it comes to self-inflicted death. Cooper once said that the death of his mother is different from the earlier two losses he experienced. He was able to talk to his mom about these tragedies, and now it's her turn to go as well. Anderson Cooper's mother, Gloria Vanderbilt, died in 2019 at the age of 95 after a courageous battle with stomach cancer. She was accompanied by loved ones at her home in Manhattan when she passed away. Gloria Vanderbilt was a multi-talented woman who achieved great success in the arts, literature, acting, fashion, and social circles. In spite of her difficult upbringing, which included a highly publicized custody fight and the suicide of a son, this remarkable lady is celebrated today for her boundless imagination, her dynamic personality, and the lasting impact she had on the art and fashion industries. While Anderson was growing up, he had a special bond with his mother, Gloria Vanderbilt. Gloria was an accomplished fashion designer and artist. Anderson looked up to her for her adventurous spirit and her knack for embracing life's unexpected twists and turns. They were very close, with a strong bond of love and understanding. They helped each other through tough times, including Anderson's father and brother's deaths. They were honest and open with each other, even when discussing sensitive issues. And they wrote a book together, The Rainbow Comes and Goes, about their heartfelt talks about love, loss, and life experiences. Gloria was immensely proud of her son's achievements, and Anderson greatly respected his mother's resiliency and creativity. Anderson will always remember Gloria as the person who gave him an appreciation for art, a thirst for adventure, and the value of savoring every moment of life. He will also always honor her memory and the legacy she left behind. In the aftermath of his mother's death, Anderson Cooper dealt with his sorrow in a complex manner, calling on his journalistic instincts, his own experiences with loss, and his creative drive. He undertook a very introspective process of going through her possessions, reliving memories, and facing his emotions. Even decades after his suicide in 1988, Gloria Vanderbilt and her son Anderson admitted that they never really found closure. The anguish of Carter's death lingered in their lives, and Gloria took solace in preserving his memory by urging others to share anecdotes about him. Gloria Vanderbilt was born into the extraordinarily rich Vanderbilt family and became a public figure at an early age, having had a highly publicized custody fight while a kid. Her life was at once very public and very private, full of glitz and sorrow. She was married 4 times and had 4 kids, one of which was Anderson Cooper, a CNN anchor. She was also an actress, artist, novelist, and fashion designer. Her famous designer jeans were a huge hit in the 1970s. How did Cooper manage to deal with all of these terrible losses? It's one thing to lose a father at a young age, but it's another to lose 2 more family members at once. She overcame enormous personal obstacles by living in the present and expressing her creativity. She passed away in 2019 at the age of 95, leaving behind a legacy in the fashion and art industries. Anderson Cooper was profoundly affected by the many touching messages he received from listeners about their own grief experiences. He came to terms with the fact that he had repressed his own feelings for far too long. He started going through his family's possessions again and came across an essay his father had written on the value of grieving. The essay's citation of a psychologist's description of the effects of improper childhood grieving struck a chord with Anderson, who realized that he had repressed his sadness over his father's and brother's deaths, resulting in a lessened ability to experience joy. After reflecting on his father's remarks and the messages he received from his audience, Anderson came to the realization that in order to feel all of life's emotions, he needed to face his sadness. The All There Is podcast was Anderson Cooper's outlet for grieving and a means of reaching out to others in a similar situation. In the beginning, he recorded himself talking about his experiences as a kind of therapy, drawing inspiration from Viktor Frankl's book about finding meaning in suffering. However, he soon realized that sharing these personal reflections could be helpful to others, so he decided to turn them into a podcast. The podcast delves into different aspects of loss and grief, including personal stories, expert insights, and philosophical reflections. It has touched many listeners and has become a valuable resource for those managing their own grief journeys. Anderson concurs that loss can lead to a more profound human experience, enabling more love and a broader spectrum of emotions. He reflects on an earlier interview with Stephen Colbert, in which Colbert offered profound ideas about loss, such as viewing it as a gift and learning to love the pain. Cooper finds these concepts difficult but worthwhile, and they have struck a chord with him. In contrast to the wealth of information about birth, he finds solace in the fact that grief is a universal human experience and that he is not alone in confronting it. He also remembers his mother's acceptance of life's difficulties, including death, and criticizes the lack of open discussion about these topics. In an exclusive interview, Anderson Cooper argues that journalists should not become emotionally detached from the suffering they cover, but rather must truly feel and comprehend the emotions of the people he covers, not judge them based on how bad their circumstances are. He talks about this with B.J. Miller, a palliative care physician who has experienced big loss. Cooper thinks about how he wants to get close to death, not to be cold to it, but to feel and understand it. He draws a parallel to a scene in Dances with Wolves, where Kevin Costner rides into gunfire not for the adrenaline rush, but to embrace whatever happens. Rather than aiming for numbness, Cooper emphasizes in his personal account of a gunfight in South Africa that he sought the intense sensation of being totally present in a life-or-death scenario. Anderson was nevertheless one of the most prominent journalists and broadcasters of his day, despite these setbacks. Renowned American journalist and political commentator Anderson Cooper now hosts CNN's Anderson Cooper 360 Degrees and contributes to CBS News' 60 Minutes. From his early days as a war correspondent, he reported from all over the globe. After joining CNN in 2001, he became famous for his coverage of Hurricane Katrina and the Haitian earthquake. In addition to hosting his own daytime talk show and winning multiple awards, including Emmys and Peabodys, Cooper is openly gay and a recognized leader in the LGBTQ+ community. He has been honored with GLAAD Media Awards and the Walter Cronkite Award for Excellence in Journalism. Over the course of his decades-long career as a journalist, he has amassed an impressive list of honors and recognition. Among these are 18 Emmys, 2 Peabodys, and an Edward R. Murrow Award for reporting. His coverage of the 2010 earthquake earned him Haiti's National Order of Honor and Merit, and he was awarded the Poynter Medal for Lifetime Achievement in Journalism. 3 of his books have also been New York Times bestsellers. Anderson Cooper's early life was influenced by both his illustrious family and a string of tragic events, creating a rare combination of fortune and sorrow. Although he had a brief career as a child model and was taken for Harper's Bazaar when he was a baby, he was born into the affluent Vanderbilt family in 1967 to the legendary Gloria Vanderbilt. This provided him with access to a world of elite society and creative inspirations. His artistic and literary interests were inspired by his parents. Growing up with a young loss gave him strength and a profound gratitude for life. His experiences have molded his compassionate reporting style and his capacity to relate to those who have overcome adversity, His tragic upbringing gave him a strong will to succeed on his own terms, and while a college student, he toured the world, even reporting from war-torn areas. His enthusiasm for reporting the news and sharing stories led him to pursue journalism without any kind of professional education. He describes himself as a news junkie since he was in utero. After his first experience in correspondence work in the early 90s, Cooper took a year off from reporting and studied Vietnamese at Vietnam National University in Hanoi. He had interned at the CIA for 2 summers while at college, with a focus on political science. His entry into journalism was unprepared. After graduating from Yale, Cooper tried to get entry-level jobs at ABC and telephone operations, but he was turned down. Instead of trying to break into on-air reporting, he decided to get a friend to make him a fake press pass. At the same time, he was working as a fact-checker for Channel One, a small news agency that makes a youth news program that runs in many American middle and high schools. Armed with his fake press pass, Cooper went into Myanmar on his own and spoke to students who were opposed to the government. Cooper spent a year in Vietnam studying Vietnamese at the University of Hanoi after his reporting in Myanmar. He managed to convince Channel One to let him borrow a Hi-8 camera, which he used to film and compile reports on Vietnamese culture and life. In 1992, he documented stories from Somalia, Bosnia, and Rwanda. After doing these kinds of projects for a while, Cooper realized in 1994 that he had grown numb to the carnage around him. The Rwandan genocide's horrors seemed inconsequential. From his humble beginnings as a news correspondent for ABC to his current position as co-anchor of their overnight news program, Anderson Cooper's career has been anything but linear. After experiencing burnout, he took a leave from news to host the reality show The Mole. He also occasionally filled in as a co-host on Live with Regis and Kelly. This demonstrates his openness to exploring different avenues within the television industry, even deviating from his main focus on journalism. After 2 seasons of The Mole, Anderson Cooper got back into news reporting in 2001 when he joined CNN. He began his career as an anchor on American Morning and swiftly advanced to weekend primetime and, more recently, began anchoring CNN's New Year's Eve special. He broke away from the traditional all-knowing style of anchoring in 2003 with the introduction of his own show, Anderson Cooper 360 Degrees, and became famous for his emotionally charged coverage of disasters like Hurricane Katrina and the 2005 tsunami. Not tragic, but one of the most controversial news about Anderson is his gender identity. Is he proud to be one? His impactful coverage led to increased responsibilities and a primetime slot for Anderson Cooper 360 Degrees, further solidifying his position as a key figure at CNN. He also achieved a multi-year deal with CNN, allowing him to contribute to 60 Minutes and significantly increasing his salary. To address the increasing speculation about his sexuality, Anderson Cooper came out publicly as gay in 2012 in a statement to writer and blogger Andrew Sullivan. He wanted to do it on his own terms, free from the pressures of media attention and speculation. Cooper said in the statement that he felt comfortable being gay and proud of his identity, and that he hoped his coming out will assist those who are also battling with their own sense of self-discovery and visibility. Cooper was close with Anthony Bourdain and paid tribute to him after his death in 2018. He continues to remember Bourdain fondly. In 2021, Cooper co-authored a book about the history of the Vanderbilt family, exploring his own ancestry and the family's legacy. Apple CEO Tim Cook sought advice from Anderson Cooper before he publicly came out as gay in 2014. Mizani and Cooper had purchased a historic estate in Connecticut in 2014. They later separated in 2018. Anderson Cooper is doing great as he keeps himself and his family very busy. He is still the anchor of his CNN show and a reporter for 60 Minutes. Lately, he has been delving into the subject of loss in his podcast and other endeavors. He is a devoted father who, with his ex-partner, shares parenting responsibilities for his 2 boys. An avid researcher of his family tree, he has just published a biography of the Vanderbilt family. Anderson Cooper manages to keep his job, family, and personal interest all in check, despite suffering setbacks and difficulties. Post your opinions on Anderson Cooper's horrific experiences in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more compelling content like this.